What's good, everyone? Welcome back to My First Kicks. This is episode 161, and this week I welcome Nick DePaula to the podcast. Now, if you are not familiar with Nick DePaula, he is one of the best. I cannot stress this enough. The best sneaker journalist, probably top five all time. I don't know, but it's wild that I was able to get him on here. Shout out to Trey, former guest Trayvon. He was able to put this together, and it's absolutely wild that I was able to get him on. We talk about so much basketball sneakers. I nerd out. It was absolutely wild while recording this because it felt like I could nerd out to the umph degree. So I'm very excited for y'all to listen to this. Big announcement in a couple of weeks. I will have my first in studio episode. I have the guest book. We're recording it this week, and it's going to be an amazing time. I'm very excited to see and hear feedback from that episode. Also, next week, I will be dropping a new Kick Talk with two special guests and just trying to keep this momentum going. Look, Nick DePaula's on. This is a hell of an episode. I'm very excited. Nick DePaula is I want to say a big fish in my list. And yeah, as you know, and if you follow me on Twitter, please follow the Twitter. I had said 4 big guests. And in my opinion, Nick DePaula is one. I mean, he's interviewed people such as Damian Lillard, DeMarcus Cousins, PJ Tucker, Kevin Garnett, Kobe. Come on, man. It's wild. So let's just jump into the episode, onto where you can find Nick. You can find him at Nick DePaula. That's NickDepaula. Also, check out his stuff on Boardroom, especially his sneaker game newsletter. You're going to see it in the description of this podcast. So make sure you subscribe. Subscribe. We definitely talk about a lot of Anthony Edwards on this one. And he talked about the Anthony Edwards AE1 on that newsletter. Very knowledgeable. You get a lot of information. And you know where to find me. I am Who Is Haas on all social medias. Follow the podcast at My First Kicks Pod. Follow the podcast on TikTok at My First Kicks. I'm back to posting to TikToks. I'm so back and forth whenever I do an intro, but I've been doing these, I guess, sneaker thoughts, my sneaker thoughts, and I'm just posting them. Zero effort. I just want to get some more stuff off my brain, especially when it comes to sneakers, and especially when I'm doing work in sneakers now. So I'm viewing and looking at everything. So I just have thoughts here and there. And you'll get them on TikTok. You'll get them on IG, My First Kicks Pod, as I said. Look, I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. So please, if you're not watching this on YouTube right now, and if you're listening to this, please jump right onto YouTube. Look up My First Kicks. Hit up the link tree in the description. It's all there. Everything is there. I'll have a link to this specific video that if you're listening to, you can switch over and watch me and Nick DePaula talk. So, on to this week's episode with Nick DePaula. Hey, Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me on.
Nah, man, this is a gigantic honor. Shout out to Trayvon for making this happen because you were on this. Like, I have a list of people I'm absolutely dying to get, and you've been on that list. And so you're one of my big fishes, I like to call. You're like with Russ, you're with Jacques Slade, all those people.
No, those are some great names, and I always joke I love doing stuff like this. And having said that, I put you through some hoops the last 2 weeks to make it work. So I appreciate you being
I
patient.
mean, I was not going to talk about it, but
I
yes, you
appreciate
sure
you being
did.
patient with me, man.
Yeah, look, it's the nature of the business, as everybody says in entertainment. It's when you get busy, somebody gets busy. You got to roll with the punches. I always roll with the punches. And podcasting, you're doing this as a favor for me and a favor for Trayvon, I would believe. But you're doing this as a favor in my opinion, and I appreciate you just being here.
No, for sure. And there's two phrases I always use. One is busy is good. So sometimes things
Hmm.
comes up and that's part of it. And then I always tell my mom, there's a lot of moving parts. So you gotta be ready to be flexible and ready to roll, So no worries at all.
I mean, look, I'm pretty sure everybody knows who you are, but for people who aren't familiar with you, how about you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Nick DePaula. I grew up in Sacramento, California. I like to think I'm just somebody that likes shoes a lot, but I've been lucky to sort of build it beyond just liking shoes as a 10-year-old and been able to write about the shoe industry all this time since. So, I was at Soul Collector Magazine for 8 years, spent some
Mm-hmm.
time with the great guys over at Nice Kicks as well. Spent the last 6 years at ESPN and now really building something exciting and special at Boardroom with my own newsletter, The Sneaker Game, which you can subscribe to.
Mm-hmm.
And just really trying to break down the business of the sneaker industry. So I'm based here in Portland, which is really strategic because Nike and Adidas and Under Armour all have offices here, and
Mm-hmm.
it's been a fun little ride so far.
No, yeah, you're an absolute legend in my eyes, and because I'm always been a big fan of just basketball sneakers overall. I mean, to me, basketball sneakers are such a big gateway into sneaker culture, but basketball sneakers are something that, especially when you were writing in the heyday of like the LeBrons, the KDs, and the Kyries were going crazy. I think that like basketball sneakers were always just a part of just everyday wear and the functionality of like when you would go to school, you'd be like, oh, I get to play ball after. Now I got to wear my Air Flight 95s to school.
Yeah, and
So
that
yeah.
was that was how it was. I'm glad you said the heyday because you're probably referencing the 2008 to 2014 run, right? Where like
Hmm. Yeah.
to me, that was such a great time for Nike because they had LeBron and KD and Kobe just really on fire, and then Kyrie and PG were right after, so it was fun.
Hmm.
And then for me, like it was the mid '90s that I grew up in, so you did have like your Deion Sanders, your Bo Jackson, your Ken Griffey shoes that were
Hmm.
cross training shoes basically that were great shoes, but like you said, it always comes back to basketball for me because you're able to buy the exact same shoe that the player is wearing. They're playing in cleats in the NFL and in baseball, and basketball is the one shoe that hopefully transcends all the touch points of style, music, fashion, technology, design. Like there's just so much that goes into it. And that's to me what makes it so much more of a emotional connection you could have with shoes you grew up wanting to get, shoes you couldn't get growing
Hmm.
up, and then shoes hopefully that you're able to get your hands on that some of your favorite players wore.
No, yeah. The 90s basketball I always say 90s basketball sneakers are undefeated in my opinion. You know, it, it, Nike and other brands like Adidas were taking chances with what they're trying to do in terms of getting into the basketball space, and it was all about functionality and how do you make functionality look cool. And I always thought, you know, especially like going into the 2000s. I mean, one of my favorite basketball sneakers, and I talked about it, and I wanted to come back. Are the Hyperfly twos?
The twos.
The twos, yeah,
Oh man.
the one with the bubbles on the
I
side.
know, I know. What's funny? I'm going to tell you a quick story because I was dying when I
uh,
saw your shirt. So this was the first shoe I bought with my summer job money, and it
mhm.
was the red Hyperflights.
Oh.
And all my teammates here, lean back a little. All my teammates called me Dorothy. All my teammates called me Dorothy, and that was the funniest thing ever to me because I mean, I was wearing these because Jason Williams wore these in Sacramento. He
Mhm.
had the purple pair, of course. I went to McClatchy High School in Sac, which was red, but so I wanted to get the red. This was a long time ago before you didn't have to match your school colors.
Yeah.
It's long before the color rules. But back then, of course, your coach would be on your head if you didn't match. I mean, my coach had the white and red toe questions, which was fun for us too, because he was kind of
Mhm.
into. He was an older dude and like he was probably late 50s white guy, but he thought those were fresh, so that was his shoe. He just liked AI, but to me, like this was a big shoe for me growing up, and it was just funny that you're wearing the shirt because they were like there was a dude named Ben who was a year older than me. He was just calling me Dorothy
Mhm.
all the time in practice because back then the Hyperflight was kind of it seems basic now to just have a shoe in all one color, but
Mhm.
back then, especially with I think they had 7 or 8 colorways in that original campaign ad where they're dipping the shoe in
Yeah.
the paint and it's talking about just how flooded the colors are. That was an innovation in itself, which was crazy to think about now, but it kind of spoke to the time. And then you fast forward another year to the Hyperflight 2, and like you're talking about, you got the lenticular panel on the side, and it was that
Mhm.
much more crazy. So that
So
was a fun
that's why
shoe. Yeah.
I want to say like that's why I wanted those Hyperfly 2s. I got them back when like they first dropped. It was like the biggest purchase I could get my mom to make me at the time, and it had that weird, crazy. I was like, "This is sick." The Hyperflight 2, like everybody was rocking the Kevin Garnett stuff
Yep.
and the Kevin Garnett joints, and which I forget the
Flight
name of
Posit
them.
threes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Flight Plaza threes. And so when I was like, I'm big on I'm gonna be different. I'm gonna be different, right? And we went to Foot Locker. I saw the Flight Plaza threes, and I was like, everybody got those, the blue joints. Let me get the Hyperflight twos with the whole like the whole weird stuff on the side, looking like an alien.
So I just got a brand new pair of silver ones,
Mm.
but I'm terrified to wear them because they're just going to crease like crazy. And
Yeah.
the hyper like this red pair, I actually wore these. I know the date. It was January 10th of 2020 because it was actually a birthday party for Trey, who helped to put
Hmm.
this together. And we had a 2003 party, and the next day I was looking at him, and the whole toe was like cracking and creasing. They just
It's an OG pair.
yeah,
Like you had like an old
this
pair.
red pair right here. Yeah, so they were just they had better times, and then uh,
I mean, it's like I don't know. It's like patent leather material. I don't know what kind of
yeah,
material
you
is
can kind of
it.
see it like this little crack right here
Yeah.
where it was cracking on me. But it was a fun night. But yeah, those to me, like that Hyperflight in particular, was a fun shoe. And then I'll have to text you a photo of. I actually have a sample Hyperflight, and
Mm.
the whole shoe is that material. Is like that.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
they're nuts.
That like weird. I don't even. I thought when I first pressed on it, or whatever. I thought it was like gonna move around.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought it was gonna be like one of those like weird moving around things, and it didn't do anything. But I was still like, I gotta. And I used to play ball in them. It
Yeah.
was.
We would.
They were not. I don't know if they were great for
I know
balling, in my
Nike would
opinion.
call it lenticular, but we didn't. I mean, we didn't really call it with the tech. We didn't know the technical terms, so we
Hmm.
were calling them like the bug eyes or stuff
Yeah.
like that. We didn't, but that was a fun shoe because that was also like that was when Battlegrounds was launching, so they had the platinum
Yes.
posits as well, and
Hmm.
that's one of those team bank shoes that like I remember Maryland was wearing, and it was just a cool shoe. Like it was funny because I've heard PJ Tucker say like that's one of the shoes he's still trying to track down because they're hard. They're just hard to find, and I don't know if they would
Yeah.
ever get retroed. Like there's certain shoes that as much as we might want them to, they'll probably stick to more foam posits and not the Flight Posit
Hmm.
3. But
No, yeah, the Flight Plaza 3 was definitely. I definitely think it was a hard sell because I bought them maybe 3 weeks after they were released or something like that. Like it wasn't like flying off the
yeah, oh
shelves
yeah.
like the Flight Plaza threes.
I mean, it went
So
from each one like foam posit, Flight Posit 2, and Flight Posit 3. Like it was dipping almost each year in terms of
it's
sales and
going down.
purchases. So I thought all of them were great in the Ultra Posit too, but yeah, they were kind. You could tell it was kind of running its course.
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh well, let's hard pivot right
Sure.
into the question that I ask everybody each week on this podcast. I don't know why I wanted to say that, but and that question is, what's your first kicks? What's that first pair of sneakers you absolutely needed to have?
Man, so growing up in Sacramento, I've told this story a few times, but my mom had a budget for me. So
Hmm.
it was $40 in middle elementary school and then 50 in high school. So the shoe I wanted was the Zoom Flight 95.
Hmm.
Jason Kidd was wearing them. He was from the Bay Area. Like I grew up in Sac, so it's
Hmm.
like an hour and a half away. He was on the Mavericks at the time, and I just loved like I love tall point guards that had flashy passes. So like,
Mm-hmm.
Jason Kidd and Penny Hardaway were my first two favorites. Of course, Jason Williams a couple years later, but I couldn't get the Zoom Flight 95s because of the price. I believe they were either 110 or 125 at the time, which
Mm-hmm.
anything over 100 I knew was out of the question. So it could have been 150, whatever. It was like, all right, I'm not going to ask for
Yeah.
those. So like penny twos I really wanted, and I just knew not to even ask. But
Mm-hmm.
then I was looking at Mitch Richmond, who I really liked, and he was one of my favorite players growing up because he was on the Kings, and he
Mm-hmm.
was wearing the Thrill Flight, which was like what's called the takedown version of the Zoom Flight.
Yeah.
And that shoe was, I believe, $85 retail, which
Mm-hmm.
was still too high.
Right.
So finally, they were on sale. I specifically remember this. They were on sale for $58 at JCPenney.
Mm-hmm.
I had to mow the lawn for like a month to get my 18 bucks up.
Yeah.
And, and then one day we went down to JCPenney and I got Thrill Flights, and it was I was a size 9.5 at the time. I was in 5th grade. It was the
Mm-hmm.
black pair with the white contrast stitch and the gold accents, which was the exact one that Mitch was wearing. So even though I wanted the J Kids at first, and that's the shoe that like got me into shoes, I say a lot of times, and that's the shoe that made me
Mm-hmm.
realize like, whoa, what's going on with these? Because they were just so futuristic. I mean, even
Yeah, they were.
25 years later, they still are. But the Thrill Flight was still like the shoe I just cherished getting because it was still a shoe that Mitch was wearing. They had the bubbles on the side, but not they weren't molded like on the Zoom Flights, but it was
Right.
still like
Yeah.
a
They were like embossed.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then it's funny talking about Flight Posit threes because Aaron Cooper designed those, and
Mm-hmm.
I've been a fan of Coop's designs for a long time. I think he's one of the 3, 4, or 5 greatest shoe designers that ever lived, which I
Agreed.
know is high praise. He was kind of bugging out when I said that. I was like, "No, man, like you really are." And I forget, he said something about what was your first shoe, and I told him, he's like,
Mm-hmm.
"That's the first shoe I ever designed."
That's crazy.
Nuts.
You know what's funny?
Yeah.
It's because I'm about to read his Instagram post
Yeah,
on
so
this
he did a whole
for the
Sunday story
listeners.
about him recently, which was awesome to hear the process. 'Cause,
Mm-hmm.
I was in a whole nother world as a 10-year-old at the time, and I was just getting my hands on him for the first time.
Mm-hmm. All right, so here we go. Here's a little bit of just a little bit background and some information for the listeners here. So the Air Thrill flights are. Did you know Nike's first footwear intern designed the Air Thrill flight, and that is Aaron A.C. Cooper. What? No, wait. Background. Araya. No, wait. No. Here we go. Here we go. I just wanted to talk about the design features.
Yeah.
There is no more thoughtful attention to foams and textile synthetics and EVA density for better fit and comfort. Expressive midsole that families with the Zoom 95, binded edges, and deco stitching for color pops, and high trail midfoot plate for a sculpted look with stable performance, which is
You gotta
like, I
think,
mean, I don't know.
this is like, I mean, we're
Yeah,
in 2024. He designed the shoe in 1994. Like, how
exactly.
crazy is
20 years.
that? So, like, I
Wait, no,
actually
30
have,
years later.
so I brought, like, so this was the Zoom Flight 95, right?
Right.
So this is the molded and the carbon fiber, and Eric Avar did
Mm-hmm.
these, and like this shoe is insane. And then you have the Thrill Flight, which still has the spheres on it, but like Coop was saying, like you got the molded swoosh, kind
Mm-hmm.
of have like this cool, like it's not carbon fiber, but it's got this cool molding texture to it. And like for
Mm-hmm.
$85 at that time, like this shoe was fresh. And then Nike did a really good job too, because you had Gary Payton was probably most known for wearing these.
Yeah, I was just gonna say Gary
His
Payton.
pair was like all
Uh,
white with green accents and black piping.
right.
This was the color that Reggie Miller wore, and then
Mm-hmm.
Mitch wore the black pair. So you had like 3 of the best guards that all became Hall of Famers. They were all wearing the Thrill Flight, so it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't looked at like it was some cheap shoe or some lower tier version that like wasn't cool. Like they still
Right.
had like high level guys wearing it, but I think that just speaks to like Coop's ability as a designer at the time to like take what Avar had started and then just build a version that a 10-year-old could still be feeling good about himself if they got their hands on those at JCPenney. So
Yeah,
it was
for
cool to
real.
see.
I mean, it's still wild because the I mean, everybody talks about Gary Payton's like sneaker pathway,
Hmm.
like until till you get to the glove and then son of glove and then
Yeah,
you get there. But this being one of the first shoes that he was wearing as a Nike athlete is still crazy. Um,
yeah, and I want to say
but
he wore those going
yeah,
into that was the year they played the Bulls in the finals.
hmm
So it was a cool time because you just had like GP at the top of his game, taking that shoe to the heights it did, and then obviously J Kidd was playing crazy ball at that time too. So for me, being 10, it's fun thinking back to your first shoes, but it just kind of like it goes to show like how connected you get to a pair of shoes, and then how much that opens the world to like what else is out there, and you start looking at Penny 2 the following season, and
hmm
Zoom Flight 5s and the gloves like you said, and it's just like creates this pipeline of excitement of like there's certain players you want to follow. I didn't know who Eric Avar and Aaron Cooper were, but like
hmm
3 years later I saw them in the first issue of Kicks magazine, and all of a sudden I'm like, all right, I need to know like what these guys are up to, because I was
yeah.
just blown away by what they were creating. So I
Were you always an inquisitive like kid or person?
yeah, I was, because I was so into basketball. I played a
Hmm
bunch of other sports too, but it wasn't even close to like how much I followed the league in terms of the NBA. And that
hmm
was just such a fun time because you had, of course, the Bulls were on their three-peat, starting their second three-peat run, but you just had all these new guys too coming in between, Jay Kidd and Penny and Grant Hill even, and Kobe was in that same chapter, the whole 96 draft class, and, Kevin Garnett the year before, like that 95, 96, window was just like, you had like,
Don't forget
yeah,
Marbury.
like literally you got probably like, 12 Hall of Fame guys in a 2-year span,
hmm
all have big personalities. And then, the fun thing about the mid 90s too is like a couple were at Adidas, a couple were at Fila, a couple were at Reebok.
hmm
Like it was really balanced. You had guys at every brand. So, growing up, I was following every single brand. I wasn't just somebody that just grew up with Nike. Like, of course, the Thrill Flight was the first shoe I wanted, but
hmm
I wanted the Answer ones the year after that. I wanted the Kamikaze twos, and all that kind of stuff. So it was a super fun time to be coming up because it made you just be open minded. So I was,
Yeah,
ever since then, kind of with that foundation, I've always just been excited to see what's everybody got going on, and see where that could take them.
yeah. It's super interesting to see that and learn that because we definitely are in this realm of everybody's kind of wearing the same stuff all the time, or in the 2000s, I think brand loyalty was such a big thing,
Hmm.
where you had to be like, oh, yeah, I'm dripped out in Echo, and I had to be dripped out in, or else you weren't relevant, and
Yeah.
that like expanded beyond that. Now it's the fashion side and streetwear side. It's so like intertwined of just like you can rock whatever, but you still have brand loyalists when it comes to sneakers, and I think that it's I don't know if that's like generation passed down or if that's just great marketing, but you can definitely see that like in the 90s that everybody was trying something new, like I think that spread out into basketball too, because then you have and one popping up, and then you have people trying like to take street
Oh
ball
yeah.
somewhere, so yeah.
Yeah, and each brand, that was the best part. Like each brand had its own little like design style, their own technology. Like they really had a unique point of view. Like the
hmm
Feet You Wear stuff didn't look anything like the Zoom stuff, which didn't look anything like what AI was doing with Reebok. So it was kind of a fun time because everybody was like real distinct. But I think if
hmm
you look at like, I mean, shit, it's been 25 years since then, almost 30. But if you look at like the
hmm
chapters in like sort of like 5 to 10 year chapters, like the 2000s, Nike was just so dominant as they got to the end of the decade at like '08 with
hmm
like the Hyperdunk and LeBron 7, and KD 4 was taken off, shortly after. Like they just, Nike was
hmm
on fire with some of the signatures they had, and they were just pushing the envelope in terms of innovation too. And then, that was kind of when Adidas was in a tough patch. D Rose was hurt, unfortunately, and the
right
Dwight shoes were kind of trailing off. And so
hmm
you didn't have, I mean, Steph hadn't signed with Under Armour yet, and LaMelo obviously with Puma, and New Balance wasn't in the mix. So, there was just not a lot of options.
hmm
Now there's like, I think it's coming back to that balance. I would say
oh, you think?
the last year alone, I mean, I've just been I'm always really paying attention to what the Chinese brands have going on, and
Hmm.
like Leaning has been putting out some crazy stuff, some really good design.
Anta has been doing
And some
some
stuff with
stuff.
Clay has been really impressive, and I'm really
Hmm.
excited to see what Kyrie's able to build over there. I think they have a good
Hmm.
opportunity to really like put out some impressive stuff that I think is going to catch people off guard, like how deep the storytelling and the effort into it is. So to
Hmm.
me, that makes it fun because if you got like 4 or 5 brands in the mid '90s hitting on all cylinders, that's going to push. Obviously the top dog being Nike, that's going to push Nike to put out even better stuff.
Yeah, for
So I
sure.
think
And then we'll get,
we're seeing that right now.
yeah. I think, especially one thing that I always love is just technology in basketball sneakers, because as a brand figures out, like, oh, this is the next thing that's going to make your take your game to the next level per se, then the other brands find that and be like, okay, we got to find our equivalent or make something
Mhm.
better. And so it just continues to push everybody forward. I mean, during the flight, like during the era of the hyperdunk, it was like everybody was trying. Okay, Adidas was coming out with Boost sneakers to figure out how to create comfort on the other side. Like everybody, all the brands try to find a way to get into that lane of like, let's make more comfortable, or let's make more enhancements to our designs. And I think that pushes everybody
Oh
forward.
yeah, and I think like sometimes it doesn't have to be a whole category either. Like I think one shoe, like if you look specifically at like the black and white Anthony Edwards new signature, the AE ones, like
Hmm.
that one shoe for $120 with like full length boost and just how sleek and cool it looks, like that
Hmm.
one shoe could push Nike to be like, hey, we gotta bring Giannis and Ja and Book like to another level because maybe what we had, we got to go another level. So I think that's where it gets fun because I've always been like in this neutral position, just following everybody since literally I was 10 years old. I never,
Hmm.
I never really swayed too far as one, a fan of one brand. And I love to see when everybody's, got something cooking and has some excitement going. So to me, like seeing that Ant-Man shoe, I was like, oh,
That AE1
hey,
is so
I was
fire,
like, we
man.
got something here to the point where it's
Hmm.
like, it's going to make people uncomfortable with knowing they got to now up their game a little bit. And Adidas, I don't, they've had probably what 5 or 6 signature lines for the last 5 years here with James and Dame and Donovan and Trey Young as well. But none of them were quite in that tier of the Ant one. So now I think it's going to really. And especially like you see his personality. Like I was actually at the Blazers T Wolves game last night. I
Hmm.
think he had 42. And it's like he wants to be like aggressive and hostile and like going right at everybody too, and like
Yeah.
he was. I think he did an interview where they were like, "How do you like your shoe?" And he was like, "Oh, it's the best signature shoe in the league." Oh,
Yeah, I
it's
love
like
that.
if somebody is that prideful about it, and the shoe is that good, which I think it is, then that puts everybody on notice, and that's when we get some real fun times in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, Trey was talking about it recently, like, oh, he missed the era of like basketball players talking shit.
Yeah, and like
And I was like, I mean, look, I mean, there we have moments. You have Randall giving the thumbs down to the crowd, like you,
as a Knicks fan, you probably don't want it that way, but yeah, it's like I think there's two guys in particular. Like as much as I love Shea and his game, he's
Mhm.
obviously a little more on the quiet side on the court. But
Yeah,
when you look at Anthony Edwards and you look at Wemby, like regardless of how talented they are, which obviously they are, like their ability to make other people compete and go at them is I think what's really special. So you're seeing like Giannis is looking at Wemby like, all right, like what's up? Like let's have a game.
yeah,
And like that
uh-huh.
doesn't necessarily happen every night. So and same for Anthony Edwards. So I think that piece of it, in terms of how those guys are marketable, like that's going to be a big component of it because if they're able to raise the stakes, I think a lot of I don't want to say any names, but like some players probably get flack for being too buddy buddy with other players, and people
Yeah,
question how. I'm like, of course it's competitive. These guys are killers at the end of the day. But like when you really can
yeah.
see it, watching a Tuesday night game against Wemby or Anthony Edwards, you can see Wemby and Chet like they really don't like each other. They're really going at each other.
Hmm.
So that
I love that rivalry. I
yeah,
mean, I'm so excited to see how far that goes, because that's what we're gonna get for the next 10 years. So
yeah.
like, I want to see how much they hate each other.
And like that's where, when you think about like how that inspires kids in terms of shoes and marketing, like that's the stuff that
Mhm,
goes into the personality of what it means to be, impactful moving some shoes. So I think, and I'm always biased because I think NBA is the best sport in the world, but I think right now with all the
mhm,
different brands in the mix, and then this new wave of guys coming in, we didn't even mention like Luca and Tatum who are just starting out with their own shoes and coming into the mix too.
mhm,
So I think it's in a great place. Obviously, Steph, LeBron, and KD are icons, and they're 10 plus models each and all that. But
mhm.
as those guys continue to age, I think we're in a really good spot with who's up next and how exciting those guys are to watch.
That I mean, perfect. Like there, it just like being on the watch for that stuff and seeing how brands adapt to each other it does get you excited about basketball sneakers in the future. Perfect example
But
is
I would
like,
say too, like Ant being
mhm,
comfortable talking shit all the time, like he made
yeah,
Adidas comfortable to take shots in their stuff in their commercials, which
exactly.
wasn't necessarily their approach, right? So it's like,
No.
usually brands don't want to poke the bear and all that, but
Hmm.
I loved the spot they had. I was able to tweet it out, which was funny enough because it kind of blew up. But like him looking through the duffel bag,
Through the bag.
tossing everybody's shoes away,
Yeah.
and he's like, "These are the ones." I was like, "That's the fun you want to have with it." So
When he pulled out the mellows, he was like, "Oh, these are one of ones." He's like, "These ain't the ones though."
yeah.
And then he
Well,
goes into
I
the.
will tell you, I was at the Adidas office like
Uh-huh.
2 weeks before that dropped. I was like,
Mhm.
yo, you got to drop. They had 3 versions. They had one that like he says the shoe names and it shows the shoe.
Mhm.
And then the one they put out, I'm sure their legal team was on everybody's head. So like, I don't
Yeah, for
think
real.
if I recall the one that they put out, the shoes are blurred out, but
Yeah, the logos are all like chopped
yeah,
out.
so everything's blurred.
They're like
You
rubbed
could
out. Yeah.
you could pretty much still tell what's what.
Mhm.
Um, but even then, it's like that to me is what makes it fun. Like I like when people are taking shots. I like when people are, confident what they bring to the table, and at the end of the day, the whole league is about competing, and the shoe industry is no different. So if you
Mhm.
think you're at that level and you're trying to, knock down the guy in front of you, then let's have some fun with it.
Yo, for real. Look, I want to definitely talk about your time at Soul Collector because that's
Yeah,
where
yeah.
I got to learn who you were. And like, what? But before that, like, did you go to school for journalism, or did you just
Man,
like what was your career
I
path
was just
into
telling a
where you're at?
friend a couple nights ago because one of my buddies was like, he just didn't. I was meeting a mutual friend. He just didn't get it. He was like, "What do you mean you write about shoes?" And I was
Mhm.
like, "I know it sounds ridiculous, and it's probably exactly as ridiculous as it sounds, but I really did like take all the small steps along the way." So like, even before I even thought about schooling, like my mom was an English teacher, so
Mhm.
that was the foundation right there, right? Like she was just guiding me in elementary school, even without even me knowing it. And then
Mhm.
when I was in 8th grade, going into 8th grade in middle school, that was the first issue of Kicks magazine.
Yeah.
I think Slam is now, Slam just turned 30 and they have, 25 or whatever it is, 25 years of Kicks coming out, but back
Mhm.
then that was the first ever sneaker magazine. So that was kind of the light bulb. And, I became like the sports editor of the school paper, was in the journalism program.
Wait, how'd you get that? Did you just talk your way into that one?
Uh, it was like a journalism class you could take in high school.
Uh-huh.
And then
That's sick.
you gotta like there's like you had to like basically campaign for like how you see the sports section going, and then the teacher would like, I think there was like 3 of us, it was a class of like 25 kids.
Yeah.
There's like 3 of us fighting to be the sports editor, and she ended up picking me. Um but then that was already, my sights were already set going to University of Oregon potentially.
Mhm.
Because it was funny enough, in that first Kicks issue they mentioned how Nike is in Oregon and how Tinker
Mhm.
Hatfield went to University of Oregon and how that's where a lot of the Nike people went. So I'm thinking like, I guess I should go there if that's where
The pipeline.
a lot
You
of
like
people,
already.
in the shoe industry, went. I'm like, maybe
Yeah.
I should go there. So, and I knew at that time too, like you got to think this is like 2003, so Oregon is getting known for like all the crazy uniforms already, and just
Mhm.
the design element of Oregon was amazing. So, and they had a really highly rated journalism program. So I was in the journalism program there. We got to pick between one. There was like 4 different topics you could focus on. It was like TV, advertising, at that time newspaper, and then the fourth was magazine. So I did magazine, and then I started writing at Soul Collector when I was 20. So I was
Wow.
still, it was like I think it was like the summer between my sophomore and junior year.
Hmm.
Um, and I had been bugging Steve Mulholland and Alex Wang, the two co-founders, and they finally liked one of my ideas after like 5 bad ideas, and they let me write an article, and I ended up being there for 8 years. So it was amazing because, back then you got to think this was in this. I mean, shit, it's been 20 years, so it was a while ago. I am old,
Hmm.
but I was gonna say it makes me feel old, but no, I mean I am old. But it was, it was basically 9 years before Instagram even launched.
Yeah,
When
for
they
sure.
started it. So it was a print magazine. It was in Foot Locker 4 times a year, sneaker
Hmm.
boutiques around the world, and a really good subscriber base. And it became a great portal to tell the stories of the sneaker industry through, the voices of the players, but also the designers. And that was one of the biggest things we tried to do was like, go talk to Jason Petrie about the new LeBron shoe, go talk to Leo Chang about the new KD shoe. And, I think every player is different. Like some guys trust the designers and they just want the shoe to look cool and be comfortable. And that's kind of like their input. But
Hmm.
then there's other players that, are given like they're texting stuff all the time. They want a certain
Hmm.
color, a certain theme. They're super hands on. And so we really tried to highlight that side of it. Right. So it's like knowing how much Penny Hardaway was really involved at the time and how much
Hmm.
he was given. Like we were really trying to spotlight like who are the people behind the scenes at the brands, and then who are the athletes that people might know of, but that they don't know are this involved. Those were kind of the two things we were always trying to highlight. And then
Hmm.
also just the everyday people that were just collectors. Like we were trying to spotlight like who's really wearing cool stuff all the time,
Hmm.
and not just storing it in a box somewhere or just buying something because of the hype. Like I think the biggest thing I learned over the years, and I'm the same way now, it's like there's a lot of shoes worth a lot of money, but there's a lot of shoes that I think are just valuable to me just because of the story or the connection or the design. So, we were
Yeah.
always trying to find that piece of it. And I was pretty proud about our run. I mean, we had, basically a 10-year run and before we sold the magazine to Complex in 2013. So,
Hmm.
that was a great era. It was before, it's crazy to think, it was before Instagram, long before
I mean, the
Snapchat.
forums were,
But yeah, we had a message board with the
yeah,
forums, and
the message I was on there. Like
yeah, we were
I
doing
was.
different events around the
Hmm.
country, and it was just a way to like, that I give a lot of credit to Steve, the founder, because he knew there was Nike Talk and the Soul Collector message board where people were talking about shoes online all the time. But he was always trying to figure out like how can we do events that bring people together. So if you are a kid from Sacramento and a kid from the Bronx, and then there's a kid from Idaho, all three of
Hmm.
us could be hanging out in Las Vegas at some shoe event and realize we got a lot in common. So
Yeah.
it was a really cool
What?
way to bring people together in that regard.
What? So, like, I don't know if this is like a butterfly effect or like no, a Mandela effect. But I don't know if maybe you can confirm this. But there was at one point, and I feel like it was Soul Collector that put it out. But there was either a sneaker bar or a sneaker cafe in L.A.
Oh man, Soul Bar.
Soul Bar.
Yeah.
Yes, it did
Oh
exist.
yeah. Man, that was actually I'll tell you the real story. So
Hmm.
we launched it. Oh man, that was a long week. So we launched it July 7th of 2007.
Hmm.
We had the LeBron Soldiers. That was the
Hmm.
first ever Soul Collector collab. We probably had about 10 collabs to that point. That was the
Yeah,
first.
I have a question about one,
Yeah, yeah.
but
That
yeah,
was
yeah,
the
yeah,
first one that had the logo on the actual shoe visible.
yeah.
So the logo they
Hmm.
put on the side of the strap. Braun had just come off of the '07 finals, which even if they got swept, it didn't matter. Like he had put himself on the map to a whole different level and had arrived.
Hmm.
And he had already lived up to the hype, but like making the finals and carrying that Cavs team was like a big deal. So to get a
Oh yeah, I mean, if
soldier
you carry in
yeah,
Gauskas to the finals, you
I
got it.
like Big Z, but he's not a Hall of Famer necessarily. So it was like that moment was big for him, and to have
Mhm.
basically a month and a half later, or the very next month, we had a collab of the shoe he was wearing in the finals. So that was
Mhm.
amazing. And then we had a shoe called the And One Onslaught. We had a K Swiss shoe.
Mhm.
We had a Reebok shoe. We basically built the whole. It was me and like 6 people built the whole place in like 4 days beforehand.
That's
And we,
crazy.
we got we got there Tuesday morning, and from Tuesday morning until the doors opened on Saturday at noon, we were building the whole thing in the back. But we had a lot of other ideas for what that store was going to become. And Steve in particular
Mhm.
had a really good relationship with Gentry and Jordan Brand at the time. So we were going to get like a lot of different, I don't know if you remember, but they were doing like Eminem had some fours at the time.
Mhm. Undefeated.
Yeah,
Had the
undefeated. Yeah,
fours.
so there was like this whole notion of like artist collabs. There was going to be a Justin Timberlake shoe. There was going to be a Will Smith shoe. Obviously, they ended up getting shoes years down the road too. But the
Mhm.
original idea for Soul Bar that I'm not going to take any credit on, that Steve had really secured and had the vision on, was Soul Bar had this front half, which was like a gallery space, which we were going to do
Mhm.
events at. Then there was a laser machine because laser was big at that time, and you could get shoes lasered.
Mhm.
But then there was these like clear glass windows in the back where if you pressed a button, it would just smoke out.
Mhm.
And we were going to host like crazy launches of all of those different, like basically
That's
like the
crazy.
Will Smith Jordans and like all the different.
Yeah.
I think they were talking about like a Black Eyed Peas release. It was like whatever exclusive Jordans, celebrity tied Jordans were going to happen. Like
Uh-huh.
we were in talks to basically launch those at that store. And as things happen in the industry all the time, like people shift and move, and Gentry, I is one of the most, in my opinion, like visionary and revered industry execs, in the
Mhm.
history of footwear, right? So, which I don't
Mhm.
think is like a big thing to say. Like he's at that level, and at that time,
Yeah.
he was the director of footwear for Jordan Brand, and they gave him a big promotion to be the director of footwear globally. So now instead of the
Mhm.
U.S., he's in charge of. At that time, you got to think they're heading into the 2008 China Olympics. They're trying to
Mhm.
plan for more stuff in Europe. So he became in charge of all of the other priorities around the world. But
Mhm.
he no longer had the juice to say, "Hey, your little store in LA, we're going to give you some heat." So that's why the store didn't really go as planned, because we had a whole other plan for it. And once we kind of realized like, the Jordan thing isn't going to happen, then
Yeah.
we didn't want to just be another consignment store, which obviously consignment
Mhm.
stores are really popular now, but we wanted to have like fun events, experiential type stuff, things that bring people
Mhm.
together, different like panel conversations with designers, like things like that. Rather, we didn't want to just be like a shoe store,
Mhm.
because as a
I remember like
yeah, as a magazine, it wouldn't have made sense to try to be an actual boutique and compete against
right, yeah.
boutiques. And we didn't want to try to take out Undefeated, or like I know some of them were
Mhm.
nervous about that at that time, but like that wasn't our idea. It was more so like we could do these one-off events that could be pretty crazy and have some
Mhm.
special edition drops, but not like an everyday shoe store like everybody else. That's not what
Yeah.
we do.
I remember being like, "Yo, I want to go to LA just to go to the store so bad." And I was talking about it with all my friends, like, "Yo, in LA, they got this store, like that's a bar." And I was
It
just like,
was
"Yeah." I was very hyped. Never went out though.
it was off of Hollywood by the 101.
Mm.
And at the time, it's funny because I drive by it all the time now when I'm down in LA, and like at the time, the guy that owned the building was saying how it was like 2 years away from being a hotspot area, and it never really became
Mhm.
that. But
He was just trying to sell the
yeah,
space.
driving off the 101 was like ridiculous, and like it took like certain pockets of the city to get out there was a hassle. It'd take an hour to get there from Santa Monica or whatever.
Mhm.
Nah, the idea was there. It just wasn't like the timing. If we had done that in like 2005 or six, it would
Mhm.
have been crazy for sure. But
Oh yeah.
things were kind of shifting, and Nike was going towards more performance stuff anyways, and um,
Mhm.
that was unfortunately, we were really had a great relationship with and one, and they had just got bought, so they were kind of like going on the downturn, and like
Mhm.
Reebok was all of a sudden out of basketball, and Adidas didn't really have anything going. So, Nike was so dominant at that time, but you can kind of see the writing on the wall if you look at like 08, 09 being a
Mhm.
little bit of a dark period for some of the other brands. Like even Converse
Yeah.
had D Wade, and they like got out of basketball and moved him to Jordan Brand. So, it
Mhm.
went from like maybe 6 or 7 brands doing some cool stuff in hoops to like just Nike and Jordan. So it was kind of a wild time.
Yeah, for real. And then Nike decides to be like, all right, let's do the Elite Series and get back into this,
Yeah, I mean
full on.
they never really took the gas off after the Hyperdunk launched.
Hmm.
And we opened the store in July of '07. I think we closed it, right at the fall '08 stretch, right
Mhm.
around the Olympic time. It was only open for a year, but it's funny because everybody has, of course, like some what ifs in their career or whatever you want to call it, and like that one in particular, like we were all joking. We were like, man, we might move to LA. Like we might, just have all kinds of exciting stuff to do down here,
Yeah.
with different collabs and different launches. And,
Mhm.
it would have been a hub for different events all the time. So
Yeah.
just did it.
I mean, look,
Just didn't.
Soul Collector still has like legendary
Oh
collabs,
yeah, no,
even beyond that.
we had the flight clubs the year after that. We had
Mhm.
the teal max trainers the year after that. And then,
My favorite is the New Balance no wait, no. I'm confusing it. Is it no wait.
you might,
Soul Collector didn't drop
you might
that.
be thinking,
I'm thinking about Soul Box.
no, oh yeah, I was going to say, to me,
Yeah.
I got to give a shout to Matt Halfhill because Nice Kicks had some fresh New Balance stuff.
Yeah.
And Sneaker Freaker too. I mean, Woody and that team has done amazing stuff. I think that was always the fun thing for me. It's like people would be like, "Oh, like I'm surprised you're not hating on the Sneaker Freaker shoe." I'm like, that's not a rivalry. Like I'm like,
Yeah.
but like if they're doing great stories and have great issues, like that's awesome for me because I'm excited to read about it. So it was like
hmm
it was cool always meeting different people from different platforms and things like that, and Matt and the guys at Nice Kicks because it was always about like if we all do great stuff then we're just going to rise the tide of just the audience being aware of things, and hopefully
hmm
people reading stuff can get a lot more knowledge about the industry, and that's better for everybody involved. So that's kind of how I
Yeah.
always looked at it. It was never like we got to tear their hearts out, and like as much as I was talking about the competitiveness of the NBA, like
Yeah.
the sneaker world is much different, like from a media standpoint, like
Yeah, I mean, it's such a niche, it's such a niche industry that you're gonna be talking to the same people a lot, so
that too.
you can't really,
Yeah, we should.
yeah,
I mean, and I always joke like, I don't know if my grandma thought I had a real job for a long time until she like saw me on TV, but it's like for us to enjoy what we do and for this to be fun, like, it's obviously a privilege to get to write about sneakers and basketball as a career. So, we
Mhm,
were always trying to be mindful of that, and make sure that, everybody had their lane and you were having your fun within that. And it was at that time in particular, it was awesome because it was just such a wild, wild west. Like,
mhm.
the brands didn't really have any rules. Some of the designers like Jason Petrie would be like, "Yo, I just got a new LeBron sample. Swing by and check it out." I'd be like, "Of course." And nowadays you
I'll
got,
be there right now.
yeah, it's a 20-minute drive. Nowadays it's like, you got, and I respect.
Six
I
NDAs
respect.
before
I
you get through the
always
door.
joke I'm on a lifetime NDA with everybody, but now it's like 4 badge clearances and a meeting invite, and you got to meet in the designated area, and like that's totally understandable why that security is what it is. But I just say that to say like that late 2000s, early 2010s was just it was a fun and wild wild west time, and it was all an open canvas, so we could create really
Mhm.
whatever we wanted to, and every magazine, every issue, we kind of approached it that way. So it was.
No, yeah, I mean, you've got some legendary interviews. You interviewed Kevin Garnett, Kobe, like it's you have touched and talked to a ton of people and have seen such legendary sneakers even before they're even out, before they were becoming legendary.
Well,
You
that's
know.
that's probably the hardest part of actually this, because like
Mhm,
there's stuff that, like, I saw the Ant shoe last January
mhm,
and they dropped December 16th. So I'm going the whole year like, damn, I can't wait. I really can't wait for that shoe to come out. And it's just like,
mhm,
by the time it does come out, it feels like it drags sometimes. And then there's other times where it's like you get so excited seeing something, and then 2 months later you're like, yo, what happened to that shoe you showed me last time? And they're like, oh, we scrapped it.
mhm,
And you're just like, oh man, like, like there was a Kyrie shoe in particular where like I still think they should do it. I
mhm.
was like, that to me is one of the coolest things I've seen in the last 5 years, but for whatever reason, like they're not going to make it. I'm talking, it's an Anta shoe actually, and I was like, man,
Oh, is it okay?
yeah. I'm like, if they, I'm like, you need to find. I always would say the same thing. I'm like, you need to find a home for it,
Yeah.
even if like a concept car and you do 500 pairs, but like
Mhm,
there's certain things that I've always been really impressed with this industry because there's certain levels of talent and imagination that people have that like it's just crazy how people can think,
yeah.
where they can take.
Blank canvas and they can just
Yeah, and I mean
draw
every
up a shoe. It's crazy.
a lot of shoes are all the same basic shape,
Hmm.
for the most part. And seeing where certain people like the guy Patrick Zempolich that did the AE ones, I mean,
Hmm.
certain elements, of course, like the toe tip, you could say, the Yeezy, Quantums have similar color blocking or whatever, but like the way that he designed that shoe is just like, damn, like that's immediately like a striking, like incredible design. And that's the
Hmm.
part of it that all these years later is like every season there's new stuff to check out, and hopefully it's still as exciting as it was, when I started.
No, yeah. When was the last time you had to wait for sneakers then?
Oh man, that's a good one. So I always laugh because people think I have like a green toggle on my sneakers app that I could just hit and get every launch or something. But I
I mean,
really don't.
look, you definitely,
Oh,
you get the head nod on some
I joke.
pairs.
I gotta figure out what was it. The white? No, I gotta go back and look for the sake of the story. It might have
Hmm.
been there was a Jordan 3 that I bought for a buddy, and because he just didn't know how, he was like, I don't want to hassle with this. Can you get me these? And in my head, I'm like, I could try, but it could be a L for me too,
Hmm.
And so of course that's the one time I win. So it was like a Jordan 3 from like 2018, and then before that, I wanted the Spirit on Retros, which was like
Hmm.
2016. I'm not kidding. Every single sneakers launch since, I've not won. Like I've tried like obviously all the Kobe launches,
Yeah.
certain Jordan ones, certain Jordan 4s. Like
Hmm.
I love Prestos. So I remember trying for the off white Presto, just laughing because I'm like that was a quick loss on that one.
Well,
You know,
yeah, that one was literally just what Nike with the Twitter link. That was
yeah,
that era. Oh
yeah,
man, that was the worst.
they're like good luck with this, but I think that's where it's different because when I was in college, we were like camping on concrete for 2.5 days.
Hmm.
That wasn't fun either. So I always think like there's no perfect formula to launches, and if every shoe released, all over the country in every store, people wouldn't want them the same way they do if it's as limited as a Travis Scott Jordan 1 or something. So
Yeah.
every shoe has its place, and I still think like even though it's frustrating because there's stuff that I really want that I just you can't track down at the end of the day.
Hmm.
Um, it's you still as a brand you still got to have those crazy like hyped up launches that people are going to have a hard time tracking down, and that's the point. That's what creates the
For sure.
fantasy.
Scarcity tactics always
Yeah,
win.
like that'll always be the case. So
Hmm.
I'm trying to think like I mean even it wasn't an ant well no it wasn't an ant shoe, but it might have been a crazy infinity I was trying to get.
Hmm.
There's just like so much stuff all the time releasing where you just like, certain launches you don't think is even going to be hard, and then you get on
Yeah.
there like, damn, this thing smoked out. So
No, yeah, I went to the Adidas store to get the crazy infinities, and I walk in, and this is how weird this goes. I go in, I have them in my hand because they was a display pair. I go to the guy and I go, "Hey, do you have these in the 13? I'm a 13." And then he's like, "Oh, we have these." He didn't even know they were in the store. And I'm like, and then he goes, "Nah, we don't got a 13." I was like, "Cool, thanks, man." Did nobody want them? Did people want them? Because how is the one size that I want gone if nobody want them and he didn't even know they were in the store?
it's like and that's the fun of it because there's stuff that you missed out on. So like for me to miss out on some Flight 95s as a kid,
Hmm.
like if they retro, I'm gonna go to extreme lengths to try to get them. So it's
Yeah.
like that's what builds the chase, and a lot of times you miss out on shoes as a kid, and that creates the nostalgia down the road, and that's a lot of what the retro industry is all about. So it's kind of crazy to think about like the different chapters of your life and how you're connected to certain shoes and certain launches, but like for a lot of people that are really into this, like
Hmm.
that's how it extends and continues.
Have you ever got, was there ever a moment that you were able to like bring a shoe that you had to somebody who you were interviewing? You were like, "Yo, look, this is, I'm about it right now. Can you sign this?"
And well, I never asked for autographs, so
Uh-huh.
not from the standpoint of autographs, but
Hmm.
the first time I met PJ, I had the green Tinker threes on,
Mm.
and I'll never forget because he was like, "Man, you walked in my own house shitting on me." That's what he said. He was just laughing because I don't think he had those yet. But obviously, he had some other stuff, which I never
Mhm.
even got close to having. But I still joke because to me, he's got not only the best collection of anybody I've ever seen, but he's also the most knowledgeable, right? So it's like
Yeah.
it's one thing to be able to buy a lot of stuff, and that's not I don't think what makes him a great collector, but his knowledge of stuff. So
The
like
love for it. When
yeah,
you
like
when you find somebody who has like the love for it, but and also like wants to wear the shoe, it's like you just found like the holy grail of like a sneaker collector.
yeah, and like that's where like we could talk about flight posit threes and
Hmm.
stimulus flights and obscure different flight models, and
Zoom
he's
flights.
yeah he's as much a fan of that as he is how crazy his friends and family Travis Scott collection is, or
Hmm.
all the college Jordan PEs he has. So that's to me what makes it fun. But I'm trying to think like I brought like when Dame was out here a couple weeks ago.
Hmm.
I had a pair of original PDX carpet ones,
Wow.
like a very like cult shoe, especially here,
Hmm.
in Portland in particular, because that was, the PDX carpet graphic on the shoe for the first time in like a literal but fun way. And
Hmm.
so I gave him a pair of those, and like he was just lighting up, like he was hyped. So stuff like that where it's like, you know, sometimes players, years down the road and they got so much stuff and access to so much and they're just such a big star. And it's like shoes I've realized over the years is like a fun way because, you know, even like KD, like if he sees a KD3, he's like, oh, that's the shoe for my first All-Star game.
Hmm.
If he's a KD4, it's like that's the first year I made the finals. And the shoes are such a like timestamp for a lot of the moments for guys too. So for me, it's been really fun because, we were talking about the 90s and back then, even into the mid 2000s, like every shoe came out in 4 colors throughout the year
Yeah.
and that was it. And now you
Hmm.
got 20 plus colors per season. The shoes are such a like canvas for expression and almost like a portal into the personality of the players with all the different storytelling and the themes to where
Hmm.
if you go fast forward 5-10 years and you pull up any one of those shoes, like any guy is going to be like, damn, like that's the certain theme that, or, this is the Aunt Pearl and this is the,
Yeah.
the
I mean,
Miami.
it's wild to think about because when you look through when you think about like looking through East Bay magazines and how you were only able to get certain shoes in that person's team colorway, and then you'd have, your true flights or whatever, your Zoom flights and all these like off other non-signature models because
Yep.
those are the ones that the schools were able to get in their school colors. And then you're just like, okay, these are what I'm relegated to. These are, am I really this diehard for Gary Payton? Do I need green and white shoes? Like, you have to really think about it.
It's funny because I went to Oregon and my middle school colors were green. So like I always liked green, but
Hmm.
then it's like, Reggie Miller was like blue and yellow and they had like some shoes for him that were, I'm not buying these. Like the colors are kind of like tough, and it's like that's a big part of like to me what made Penny and Jordan stuff so successful.
Hmm.
Like I always wonder like if all the Barclays were like black, white, and red growing up, like would those have been that much better even? Like the orange and
Hmm.
purple was unique, but like there was something always super tough about the black, white, red.
Yeah,
Uh,
for sure.
so it's funny because Nike really did stick to the Suns colors just because of how traditional stuff was back then.
Hmm.
It'd be funny to have known like, how would Barkley have done if he was now, and he had all the graphics and all the expressions and all the different
I
options for
mean,
colors
he
that he could have
could. I don't understand why they don't just be like, yo, let's put out, some
done.
Barclays. I mean, if Dennis Rodman is getting his second chance, I guess, with the Supreme collab, then maybe we can get
Yeah.
some Barclays going.
And that's another good what if. I was trying to do a Nice Kicks collab on the Shake and Destruct,
Hmm.
and we did like this all red with the black flap cover, and then the whole liner was the print from his hair from the finals.
Oh, that's sick. That would be sick.
They were crazy, but
You just gave me an idea. Give me that, but like inside, or like give me a black and white, but like Hayes style, like like the
yeah,
the
yeah,
graffiti artist Hayes. You do it that, but then in the inside, it's Dennis Rodman with the NWO shirt on. That
yeah.
would be sick. do
Yeah,
not do not steal this. Nobody steal my idea.
unfortunately, Nike just didn't have any contractual relation with Dennis, so they couldn't do
Hmm.
anything like too direct.
Hmm.
So that was the problem there. But you know, oh damn, somebody from the Pistons just punched a guy from the Suns during pregame warmups. That's intense.
Whoa.
Um,
They really don't want to win out there.
damn. All right. I wonder what he said, but uh, it was the guy Isaiah Stewart that had chased after LeBron. So
Oh yeah, of course,
you,
man.
you know he
He's
means
wild.
business. But I think that's where it's fun to sort of look back at those '90s signatures and wonder like what would they have been like if they were being released today? Like,
Hmm.
and
I
it's,
mean,
part of it
look,
is like the opposite. Like the penny foam posit is iconic because it only was in one color.
yeah, it's true.
So it's like I think it's a gift and a curse in some ways, but um, it's cool
Until
to
I
think.
mean, I definitely think that once they dropped that eggplant color, it did also went crazy.
I know I'm excited for those. I want to say they retro February 28th or whatever it is, end of this
Yeah,
month.
I don't have. The price went up on it too. I think it's like 250 or something like that, right? 300.
230, 240.
I
It's gonna be
don't
tough.
know if I got it. I
Let's talk.
never. Well,
Let's
being a
talk.
size 13 wearing them is like. I mean, I talk about it on here. If you put on the eggplants and you're a size 13, your feet look like literal eggplants.
I love that shoe though. I'm gonna have to get there. I'm excited for the foams they got coming. I think there's gonna be some surprises in store, but
Hmm.
also like some real classics. Like from what I've seen so far, like the original Dark Neon Royals and the
Hmm.
think
Galaxies are coming back out, right?
yeah,
So.
actually the Galaxies and maybe the Coppers, which are all like to me one of the that's some of the top five best colors. So
Hmm.
I'm excited to see all those come back. And foam posits probably did need a window to get tucked away for a second, and
Hmm.
now it's
I
going to be
mean, look, they ran that thing into the ground. Remember, we had thermal print, we had Weatherman, we had pearls were coming back out. Like it was like
say it was
it's
20 like
crazy.
16, 17, where
Hmm.
you just lost track. It was like a different foam posit pro every month.
Uh-huh.
It was just so much. But foams are obviously not only a crazy design, but also just like indestructible almost, to where people were getting, it was a shoe people were excited to buy. You were talking about the Soul Collector collabs earlier, and like the one to
Hmm.
me that always stuck out was the penny pack we did. And
Mm.
we are
From
talking since we are talking foams, I'm gonna
yeah.
show you these. So
Ooh,
this was a sample of the penny pack foams that were in the Vegas pack. This
that's
one
sick.
doesn't yet have the final like copper tongue
Yeah.
logo, but and doesn't
Hmm.
have the S on the heel.
Hmm.
But we were gonna do like a matte black. I'm sorry, a gloss black, and then Gentry was thinking, and we switched it to like a matte black on the
Hmm.
pack version. But definitely,
Those are dope. My favorite collab is the Soul Collector Gary Payton gloves.
oh,
Those
the
are
gloves. That was a
yeah.
good one, man. That
That
was a good
that
one.
that's was my initial question in the beginning because it's funny. I thought like the progression was like you got the air thrill flights. That's Gary one of Gary Payne's pre signature shoes.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
like now we're gonna get to when I finally get a chance to work on a shoe. I'm gonna get the gloves.
Well, you know what? And that's a great example too, because the original we did 4 different colorways for that shoe,
Hmm.
none of which is the one you know. And the original idea was because when GP was wearing the glove,
Hmm.
it was when the team had gone to the green and red jerseys.
Yeah.
It was not the classic like green yellow.
Hmm.
So I had mocked up like all dark green, and then it had like the brick red accents, and the toe tip was white. I got the mock up somewhere.
Hmm.
And then we kind of everybody in the office took a crack. So like Zach Schlemmer did a really fresh, like more like black and green and yellow Sonics colorway. Luis Sanchez did a fresh one, and then Brennan Williams. Like we were all the dudes in the office at the time, just each
Hmm.
kind of spinning one up, and we like sent it to Nike, and they put it all in front of GP, and like right away he was like no brick. He was like no brick red. Like he
Uh,
was classic Sonics colors only, and we were all kind of like, all right, like we wanted to tie back to like the actual uniform that he wore the gloves in, but
uh-huh.
and GP obviously the Sonics at that time. This was 2013, so they had been about not quite 5 years removed from moving to OKC,
Yeah.
and he's always only ever been about like I want to do the classic, what he considers the classic, just green and yellow Sonics. So that's
Hmm.
why we kind of shifted it to that green and yellow, and then Gentry had the idea because they were doing a lot of graphics on like the Galaxy Foamposite had just happened.
Mm-hmm.
The Fighter Jet Foamposite had already been sampled. So they were starting to do more graphics on other stuff, and he thought doing just the team colors would be kind of boring. So that's why he's the one that added the Sonic Wave print,
Oh,
which is like that black wave
yeah, I
graphic.
love that. That's like what really took it to the over the edge for me.
All right, I'm glad you said that because at the time I was fighting him. I didn't want to do it because I wanted just the clean green color,
Hmm.
and he was just and Gentry has a great read on stuff, but he was just like, nah, trust me, like he was like, it's going to add to it, and it's the
Hmm.
Sonic Wave. He was like, so it's part of the story. It's like ties back to the Sonic. So it was a cool because the graphic, like if you look really closely, like it is a really detailed like wave pattern.
Hmm.
Um, and then on that shoe in particular, we had like the GP and the 20 embroidery on the sides, which only he had on his original PEs.
Hmm.
So like that was one thing with the collabs we always did was we tried to find like what was the pieces that the players really only had originally,
Hmm.
or what was like a touch that might be unique to the story that people might not be thinking of. So like the two that I probably would think of that come to mind is like doing that embroidery on the side was like really detailed. Like if you had to know to catch that.
Yeah,
And the one that I probably am most proud of over the years is like I don't know if you ever seen the Rashid Air Force Ones.
of course.
So like I was telling everybody, I said you should embroider Roscoe under the strap.
Mm.
But I said only if you flip it and put it down reverse.
Uh-huh.
Because if you like if because some originally on one of the samples they were going to embroider it to be on the front of the strap. I'm like,
Hmm.
well, that's not how she wears it. Like you would never see it that way if he was actually wearing them. So if you find like I think it's like Nick's colors, and then they did a couple other ones. But if you find
Yeah.
like Sheed Forces that are like the 2013-14 era ones,
Hmm.
um, you will only see the Roscoe part if you actually wear them how he wears them. And
Wow.
that was like his friends and family nickname. So it was like stuff like that where it's like we were doing a lot of collabs with Nike at that time, along with some other brands. But on all the Nike stuff, we were trying to find like the real Easter eggs of like you got to really be into this to know what
Yeah, I
exactly.
did. I remember trying to get these Air Forces, by the way. That was an L for me.
That was a tough one. I want to say he was on the Knicks that year, and then they had
Yeah.
it's closed now, but they had the 21 Mercer store.
Hmm.
So some of that stuff was really limited, but
That
but
place hated me. So
speaking of L's, that's a tough one. Yeah, I know people had a hard time buying anything there. It was tough, but no, I think that's like when you think about doing collabs, it's like a lot of stuff is going to come and go.
Hmm.
But if you have like the next level of and the next layer of like details and thoughtful touches and beyond just simple colors, like that's
Yeah.
what take that stuff to the next level to where if it's 500 pairs or 5,000, like a lot of the stuff we did was only 100 pairs,
Hmm.
sometimes 500 pairs, and then the gloves in particular is 5,000 pairs.
Hmm.
Like anybody that got one of those shoes, like I always felt like they're going to really cherish them and think they're really special and appreciate the detail, or resell them and make 3 times on eBay, but because everybody else wanted them too. But it's like that's at least the hope.
That's part of the business, I guess, or the
Like
culture. You know.
we were never mad seeing something go for 3 or 5 times whatever it was going for on eBay. Like that
Hmm.
obviously speaks to the excitement level around the shoe. So that's part of anything when you have like collectibles, but um, unless we like literally hand gave a shoe to somebody and they flipped them the day after, like otherwise it wasn't. We didn't really look at that as a bad thing. But the collabs
Nah.
piece,
Yeah.
that was probably, I mean, as much fun as it was to do the actual magazine and host some of those events. Obviously, getting to design some of the collabs
Hmm.
was one of the most fun things I got to work on, and hopefully, hopefully sometime soon I could be telling you about some other collabs I've been working on again. So we'll see.
That I want to hear that. So I now towards the end of the podcast, I do want to ask one last question for you.
Yep.
So I want you to deal with a little bit of visualization. I want you to think about that time when you were young Nick about to open the box of the Air Thrill flights, and now you're this age going back in time behind yourself. What would you tell your younger self as he opens that box?
Oh man, I remember putting them on in J.C. Penney and walking out in them. Like, oh, these are my new shoes. I was
Yeah.
just And I wore those literally like every day for like a year and a half straight. Like the whole bottom had like worn through to the foam.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wore the heel out to where you could see the airbag. Like it was like if my mom said I got one shoe for the year, like that's the one shoe for the
That's the
year.
one shoe.
Yeah, so I was maxing out on those. But no, I mean obviously to go from I always joke because my mom hates when I tell that story. She's like, "You act like I was so mean about our budget," but I was like, no, like it was about the lesson of like valuing what you got, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
like I would say that's the biggest thing. It's like to be able to have a couple Zoom Flight 95s, a couple hybrid flights around here. Obviously, hopefully, it means that I did something right along the way career wise and worked hard a little bit here and there to be able to enjoy the shoes I have. And then part of it too is just like I'm 38 now, and I like to think I still have the same excitement level seeing players debut new shoes or seeing people
Mm-hmm.
talk about it online, just as I did back then. I think back then it was like you'd see something at the mall or on East Bay for the first time, and you'd talk to your friends at school the next day. Then
Yeah.
there was like,
You
seeing stuff.
run. You run the next day. You like, yo, my
Yeah,
man. Did you see him?
did you see it? And then it was like on Nike Talk seeing something leak, and you're checking all the messages.
Mm-hmm.
And it became the magazines, and then it was Instagram, and now it's just group chats and everywhere. But I think that part of it has never really faded, which has been cool to see because like I was wearing the black and white ants yesterday, and some Air More Up Tempos the other day, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
still breaking out just crazy stuff all the time, just out of the fun of it. So
I'm very excited for those. Now you making me more excited about the iridescent ones that are coming out. I want those
oh,
iridescent joints.
All Star, the
Mm-hmm.
iridescent All Stars, and then it's probably the most excited I've been the last couple of years when I got a pair of the black and white ants that showed up last week randomly.
Mm-hmm.
And I should have said that too when you were asked about the sneakers app. Like, there's shoes I want to buy that I miss out on all the time, and some I'll pay extra to get them or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also stuff that shows up at the house, so I'm not complaining out here for sure. But when those black and white ants showed up, I was like looking at, I was like, this is an amazing
I
shoe.
call them the stormtroopers because they
Yeah,
look.
I've seen that's the
Yeah.
nickname that's been picking up. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
I think they're calling them the best of Audi, which I don't love that. That nickname is not that great, but
I mean, you're not gonna get Disney to be like, all right, we're cool with you calling this shoe the
yeah,
stormtrooper. So.
for sure. It's like I forget. I was joking about him. I was like, you should call him these the ones. Because that was what he was calling them in the video. So I was like,
Yeah.
I just think like that. Not only that shoe, but that color in particular. And then you were talking about the All Star one, like. I posted I don't know if you've seen the video of the shoe like rotating around
Yeah.
because in the photos it kind of just looks black and burgundy.
Mm-hmm.
When you see that shoe in person, or you see like in the videos where it's really rotating, like it's almost like a chameleon paint, like
Yeah.
almost iridescent. Like it's a little like the original Flight Posit, just how it
Mm-hmm.
goes from like that green chrome to like that burgundy
That
and
like
red.
burgundy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an awesome shoe.
I mean, one of my favorite Kobe's are the iridescent Kobe sixes. I think there are. I think
Oh
they're
yeah,
sixes.
yeah.
One of my absolute favorites. So.
I think that's where like Adidas has really just in the last couple of years with you look at like Harden 7,
Mm-hmm.
Harden 8 now, Ant 1, like I think people will be really surprised and impressed with the Dame 9s that are coming up.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got some stuff that's coming that is going to really start to like I don't want to say reestablish because they've been around for a long time, but they needed to bounce back a little bit in terms of their signatures, I would say.
Yeah.
I think anybody, that's fair for anybody to say. So for them to have a couple of the shoes that are some of the more, uh, I mean, on the Harden side, probably polarizing, and on the
Mm-hmm.
Ant side, like undeniable.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where they're having a real impact and a real momentum that is exciting for me to see because everybody's kind of looking over the shoulder now and realizing like LaMelo had his thing going and that's still going great, and New Balance is making some noise too, and
Mm-hmm.
Steph had his window and is still cooking, and now you got Adidas back in the mix here. So, and then I think around the corner we got Reebok coming back. So
Yeah, I
that's
agree.
what I was saying earlier. Like to me, it's a really exciting time.
I
The
mean,
industry,
even a perfect example is them dropping the preseason, the Emmitt Smiths,
yeah,
and they actually made like a splash. I was like, okay, all right.
Well, and in a lot of ways, I think Reebok, when you look at the '90s, they have the second best archive, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
behind Nike, of course. So there's a lot of great feet you wear stuff, but when you start to think about like Shaq and Kemp and Iverson, and then on the baseball side, Big Hurt, and then even
Mm-hmm.
Emmett on the football side, it's like, man, Reebok had some amazing stuff. So, and then Pump Fury and just that whole DMX chapter for them after that. So, I'm excited to see. I would say from the sounds of it, it sounds like All Star of 25 is going to be sort of the new start for
Mm-hmm.
it's like Shaq president era of Reebok,
Mm-hmm.
and I think they're going to really, do some fun stuff with it and make their mark out the gate. I can't wait to see what they come with because now that they're outside of the Adidas umbrella, they're gonna, be on their own, and that's for the betterment of everybody. So, to me, it's a really exciting time for the industry and something I'm looking forward to seeing unfold.
Yeah, me too. Yo, Nick, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. You're doing great work with Boardroom right now, so
Appreciate
hopefully
that,
everybody
man.
checks it out. And shout out to Gabe. That's the homie, Gabe,
Of
from
course.
Boardroom. We're connected, man. We're actually connected, man. So,
I'll hit you when I'm out in New York next for sure.
yo, that'll be dope. And then for everybody out there, you know what we say each week: wear your kicks. Peace.